Welcome back to GaleForceWins Season 2.
The GaleForceWins podcast is proudly sponsored by Newfound Marketing, a digital marketing agency located in St. John's, Newfoundland. Visit our website at newfoundmarketing.ca to find out how we can help your business grow. Newfound Marketing, a complement to your marketing team.
To another edition of GaleForceWins, and I have to tell you that it's always worth the drive to Summerside, because we're going to be in a conversation here in a few minutes with a gentleman and family that helped build this city, quite frankly, and I can't wait to get in it. I'm Alan Dale. With me as always, my good buddy from the East End of St. John's, Newfoundland, Jerry Carew. Jerry, how are you?
I'm doing well, Alan. 6 days on the road. We drove here from St. John's. Bill, Summerside is beautiful. I look forward to hearing about your story.
So, Jerry, what did you think of PEI so far?
Oh my God, Alan! I have my 15-year-old here. My 19-year-old is back in St. John's by himself. Don't quite know what he's doing.
I heard there was a party there.
Hopefully not, Bill. PEI is absolutely beautiful. I mean, it is just spectacular.
Yeah.
And the work ethic of the people making PEI what it is.
Yeah.
It's palpable, you know, it's there. So.
There you go. I'm glad you're enjoying the island, the gentle island that is.
Did you come across the ferry or the bridge?
Ferry.
Ferry, yeah, that's special.
Going on the bridge this afternoon.
Yeah, ferry is a special experience. I think everybody needs to try that if they haven't.
Well, there we are. Well, Bill, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, guys, I am Bill Schurman. I'm a Summerside native, born and brought up not too far from here, actually. Played a lot of sports when I was younger. Always found a way to get on a team that either played in provincial events or regional events or national events. So I certainly was very appreciative and mentored early in my life by a number of local coaches, shall we say. I came from a family that, as you suggested, were quite involved and have been and still are quite involved. My dad just turned 91. He can tell you all kinds of history about Summerside. My grandfather, who was my dad's best friend, and I like to think my dad is my best friend, which I think is great, obviously provided a lot of influence, and we were taught very early in our family to give back. That community comes almost before family, family first, but community right after that. So it was bred into us to get involved. I can remember a story of my grandfather and my dad telling me we used to do a lot of events, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point in time, and occasionally, you know, you would think, oh wow, we did a fairly significant feat. My dad and my grandfather and a group of individuals in Summerside in 1955 signed a note to bring the Boston Bruins into Summerside.
Really?
1955, so you can imagine 1955, how you would arrange to get the Boston Bruins into Summerside. So there's a theme to probably our discussions today, but one of them was my grandfather heard somebody from Boston being interviewed about going to Halifax. So my grandfather picked the phone up and said, I hear you're going to be in Halifax. If you're going to be in Halifax, why won't you come here? In those days, you had to put a bond up front. Well, today we do too, but in those days they didn't have a place to go for the bonds. They did it on behalf of the Lions Club. So they went to the bank, every one of them, signed a note to bring in the Bruins.
Go on.
So, you know, that kind of grounds you when you hear those stories.
Right.
On my mother's side, the Delaney's were quite active in our community. You know, my grandfather had a number of, he was an entrepreneur, have roots in Kensington, Fox Farming, so all kinds of family history. All of it, though, themed around being involved. Whether it was organizing a local event or an activity, whether it was chairing the Community Gardens Building Fund, whether it was organizing in those times shows, entertainment shows in the community, always were involved. So we had really, I wouldn't say we didn't have a choice, because we would have, but it was bred into you. I can remember Dad going to a fire in the middle of the night, coming home smelling like smoke, and we were just children in the house, and then you'd say the next day to Dad, why, like, you have to go to work now, like, why would you do that? And he'd say, well, it might be our house. Mm-hmm. So giving back, I think, is something that's synonymous within our family tree. Our best supporters tend to be our families. So when you do things well, they're the first, they'd stand in the back and let everyone else be the cheerleader, but when things don't go the way you want them to go, they'd be in the front of the parade. Right. So I mean, that's pretty important, and so I'm very fortunate to that. Educated through, Summerside schools, dabbled at Holland College, UNB, Wasn't really what you consider to be the best student in the world. Got my break really going to a small community in Bedeque, not too far from here, home of Catherine Kalbeck, our first female premier. She was on the board of Bedeque Area Recreation Centre, I think as her brother Bill. I was in school really not going that good. They had at those times they called them OJT, so they had an opportunity for someone to come out and be sort of a recreation coordinator director. I went to do that. I got called in by the guidance counselors and suggested that would be a great thing for me to try. That's really where I started to learn outside my family, I guess, about community involvement. We ran the arena with one person as an employee. I was a sort of a student, and every night of the year there would be one person from the area that would come in to volunteer. They'd come at 6 o'clock at night, they'd leave their business, farming, whatever it was doing, they'd show up at 6, they'd work till 11, and then go home. That's how we ran the arena. So as luck would have it, or not, the manager at the time had a bad day, and he threw the keys on the table and said, "I'm done." The board, which included a lot of people who went on to do wonderful things within the region and in fact the world. I drew the straw. I was the only one left. So they said, "How about you taking this over?" So that's where we started. The manager of the Bedeque Area Rec Centre was there for a number of years. And was very, very, very fortunate to learn about the importance of combining and collaborating with volunteers versus an organization that had a mission to serve its residents. And I'm sure we'll get into more detail, but that was kind of, that kind of molded me.
What year did you draw that straw?
1976, if you can believe it. I just turned 67. No interest in slowing down or doing anything different, God willing. But that straw was the best straw I could ever draw. Number one, it allowed me to play with things, if you want to call it that. I didn't look at it as work, because I think we only made about $50 or $55 a week, if I'm not mistaken. But it allowed me to do the things I loved. We started hosting tournaments. In those days, the arenas used to close at Christmas. They used to close at holidays. We thought that would be an opportunity to use the assets we had. So we started some of the very first tournaments that were held during those times. I remember we bid for an Atlantic Juvenile Hockey Championship. Now again, Bedeque would be 125 or 30 people. The arena was about half the size of the ice surface here at the Beautiful Cup. And we bid for this, and they turned us down. I got a letter in the mail. Those days there was there was mail. So they turned us down. And I was a relatively young person at the time, and had mentioned I'd played a number of bigger events that we probably shouldn't have, punched above our weight. So we took exception to the fact that they wouldn't give us a reason why. So again, community, we went to a lawyer who was on our group and said, "Is there any grounds to this? Like, did they not have to tell us why?" And anyway, so we got a hold of the Maritime Hockey Association at the time, and the reason they gave us was our arena was too small. So we took the phone and we phoned all of the NHL arenas at that time, and none of them were the same size. They were all different. So we came to the conclusion that if the NHL didn't have everything the same size, then why would we not be able to get it? So we threatened to sue them. And as luck would have it, we got the tournament. and we actually, it was not only a successful tournament, but it opened up the eyes of the area for doing events. And we ended up having the championship game here in Summerside. We rented the bigger stadium at the time, which I ended up coming to work for down the road. So it was a good lesson in life that no doesn't necessarily mean no.
Right.
And it was a good rally point for the community in terms of, it was just a great rally point.
Where did you go after Bedeque?
Well, I applied to come to Summerside. Had a director of recreation position. So I was from here, played all my sports here, came from a well-known family. I applied for this job here probably 4 times, I think, and each time I didn't get it. So it was a job that I always wanted to have. As a young person, we had a stadium which was built in this property called Civic Stadium, then it turned into Cal Stadium, then turned into Summerside Rec Complex. But there used to be an office overlooking, right where we are, kind of overlooking the ice surface. And the manager at the time, Charlie Hogan, would overlook the ice surface when you'd be playing or you'd be practicing. And I always looked up there and said, I'd love to sit there someday. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so in Bedeck we had a great run in terms of what we were doing, and the tournament sort of opened up some people's eyes. And I guess the more times you apply, eventually somebody either felt sorry for me, or perhaps we'll give this young fellow a chance or whatever. So I did get a call one evening from a council meeting saying that this particular time I was successful. There was no negotiation. It was simply you've been picked and that's it. No, you can't. This is what we're offering you. There was no, it was almost like, do you want me to say no or what, But anyway, I worked for a volunteer board and I didn't have any choice, but because it was at a council meeting public, I had to go and visit every board member, all 12 of them that night, and just say, look, I'm sorry, I'm going to go home, if you want to call it that, and be able to work for the community. So I spent about a little better than 23 or 4 years here, Director of Recreation, Community Services, Tourism, Culture was part of the mandate. We hadn't had culture before, so we were able to negotiate it. We went through the amalgamation of the Summerside area, and we were lucky enough to be here at a time where our facilities were in need of upgrading. On the island, similar to Newfoundland, I'm sure, when you have company over, you tend to want to clean the house up. So you throw all your clutter in the closet, bring in the guests, and everything looks perfect. Well, if you think of that philosophy for a second, when you host the country, you're doing the same thing. So all of a sudden, the parks we had, or the arenas we had, or whatever we had at the time, needed to be spiffed up. And the best reason in the world to do that, to get support, was bring in the country. So it wasn't really a scientific kind of a project or a strategic planning moment. It was simply this is how we do it at this level. It's no different at the other level. So our first bid, we bid for the 1983 Canadian Junior Men's Softball Championship. We went out west. I was just thinking about the story coming here, trying to figure out how I'm going to share this. And anyway, there was a number of major cities bidding, and Summerside, which at that time we were a town of less than 10,000 people. They all had PowerPoint presentations. They all had, the bells and the whistles. I had 10 Anna Green Gables pins, one for every delegate. That's what I had in my pocket, 10.
Pins.
Anna Green Gable pins.
Right.
So it came time for us to do the bid. There was a break in between. I went to the washroom and I said to myself, you're going to embarrass yourself here. However, in order to get there at that time, there was no such thing as sports tourism. There was no such thing as economics. It was you were trying to get something to bring it to your community. So the merchants kicked in to pay for my trip. It wasn't the government just wrote a check.
Right.
Somebody gave 50, somebody gave 100, somebody gave 200. We bought an airplane trip and stayed in the hotel and did our bid. So I said, I'm going to embarrass these people with what I have. It was a first bid for us. I flipped a coin, heads I stay, tails I run. No forward.
In the bathroom?
Yep. Come up heads. Jeez, I got to go back in. So I went back in. God was on my shoulder, I'm sure of it. It came time for us to bid. And I can almost remember every word I said. And I was nervous. And I said, we don't have the lights, we don't have the dugouts, we don't have what all of these people ahead of me have. We're never going to get them unless you give something like this to us.
Wow.
Yeah.
And by gosh, they did. They did. They gave it to us. That was the first. And then fast forward, for the next 20 years, we hosted more major events, sporting-wise and others, per capita than anywhere in the country.
They called it Tournament Town for a while.
TSN named us Canada's Tournament Town. Good memory.
Right.
They really did. We were lucky enough to get into bid for and receive. We were, as a community, we were like 130-0 in bids. We never lost a bid for that entire time.
What was it, Bill? Was it the passion? Was it the people? What was it about it?
Well, it's a good question. I don't think there's one definitive reason. When you're doing something for where you live, it's different than if you're doing something because somebody's paying you to do it.
Right.
Like, it really is different. And when you have, I had volunteer committees, thousands and thousands of people here that were volunteers for projects that we've been involved in. The weight of that group is on your shoulder because you're representing them. And so when something comes here, you take it extremely seriously to the finest detail. And I think our finest moment was well, there was a number of them, but in 1989 we hosted the World Junior Softball Championship. It was a national sporting event. And it was in the fog, no pun intended, it was in the fog, and Canada was playing.
Is it common to have fog here?
Well,
I haven't seen it.
Not that common, but we always try to get our major events around Canada Day for a number of reasons. It tied into the national celebration, a funding source. It gave us a little bit fireworks at the end, like those kinds of things, like, again, using your assets. Anyway, I remember Colin Abbott, Newfoundlander, was up and hit, I think, a triple or something to win the game for Canada. And the crowd was doing the wave in the fog. We had thousands of people at the park. I remember looking at the announcer at the time and just saying, you know what, we've come full circle. People are doing the wave here. We weren't allowed to have a beer tent because a beer tent usually goes with events like that. So we weren't allowed to get a beer tent. So we didn't take no for an answer. We put the beer tent down on Water Street, down on downtown Summerside. We were like kilometers away from the ballpark with shuttles to go back and forth to the beer tent. But the beer tent was so successful. It was the first beer tent ever in the province, but it also showed that, you know, you can actually do those things and still not compromise your values as a community, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then the 94 World Tournament, that in itself, the bid, we talked about the bids, but the 94 World Tournament was probably our greatest bid. We went to Salt Lake City, Utah. They just finished hosting the Olympics. We put together a group of representatives, so every organization that had an organization had a rep on our committee. And we put a bid together that I still to this day suggest that it would be one of the better bids. We were bidding, all of the delegates were Americans. All the teams, generally speaking, were Americans. And we were really from the middle of nowhere. Like when you look at Summerside on the map and you look at the towns, you look at the cities, we bid against Toronto, Vancouver, Salt Lake, like New York, Summerside. Like the shirt doesn't necessarily, you know.
I know.
But anyway, but we had the group, and we had a role for every person on that committee. That when we hit the ground at 6 o'clock in the morning, everyone had their marching orders for the day until midnight. And then the next night or the next morning, we get up and what did you hear? What did you hear? What did you hear? What did you hear about, you know, about what? Because they were in the crowd, they were parked in the crowd. Anyway, we stayed at the Little America Hotel. And for our listeners, one of the reasons we were successful is it's not necessarily the person who has the president's role that has all the influence. The people who are the custodians and the people who are the workers and the people who make things happen day to day have a lot of influence that sometimes people don't respect. Yep. And we made sure that the chambermaids, the custodians of the hotel, etc., the people who parked the cars, we made sure that everything that we had, whether it was a T-shirt, whatever it was, they were part of our delegation. And as a result of that, they supported us, so our car always got parked at the front so everybody saw our logo. Whatever it was we needed, the troops came through. Right. And when we made the bid, Basil who was still the mayor, or was the mayor at the time, he's still our mayor here now. When he made the bid, the gentleman who got up from the ISC organization said, hosting a tournament is much like playing. You can't win unless you work. Right. And as soon as I heard the word work, I said, we've got it, because we outworked people. Yeah. From morning to night. When they awarded the bid to Summerside PEI, and this sort of brings back emotions, the staff lined up outside the meeting room, the convention room, in the hallway, and then we heard when Summerside got it, they all started to clap. All the people dressed up in the Little America uniforms, who we just knew for 9 days, came out to the front of the lobby of the hotel, and they clapped. I'll tell you that, and after it was over, the manager of the Little America brought us into a management meeting, and said, just so you know, these people from this little place taught us about people. Interesting, isn't it? Like, I mean, when you really think of that, eh? I mean, and then, I mean, there's 1,000 of those stories, but those stories really resonate in terms of people don't need to know the effort that it takes. However, when you reflect back, when you hit a certain age, you kind of look back. People ask you, how did you do? How did we do? And again, it was all we. Like, we had an army. Someone used to say, well, how do you get all the support from whomever, government or whatever it might be? If you have the street, if you have people, there's not too much you can't do.
Yeah.
Like, you're really not too much you can't do.
Yeah.
We had a mailman in Summerside, Sparky, and most people from Summerside would know him, but everyone has a Sparky. Everybody knows their local mailman at the time. And we thought that when we were doing the World Tournament, we should get the President of the United States to come. And we didn't want to take no for an answer, so we sat outside the mall, and we had volunteers, and we got signatures, and we got something like 12,000 signatures. We got Midland being a sponsor, and we sent boxes and boxes of, we'd like you to come. It was Bush, I think, at the time. Anyway, they ended up, we had a nice letter. I still have a copy of it down in my man's cave, if you want to call it that, saying thank you very much, you know. But it just, there's nothing we didn't feel like we couldn't do.
Yeah.
And I think that feeling. Not money. It wasn't about that, because everything we had to do, we had to raise our own money. We didn't get all kinds of checks, and luckily, we were successful that way in terms of paying our bills. But when you have a community behind you, like, there's really nothing you can't do when you really think of it. Now that's a blessing and a curse. Sometimes you get yourself in situations with that attitude, geez, we can do whatever it is. But on the other side, it pays, it doesn't cost, it pays to get people around you. And I think that's kind of how we were lucky to do it.
Bill, the way you describe it, it reminds me so much of the story of John F. Kennedy motivating the team at NASA to get the United States on the moon. And you would walk into NASA in those days, and you would ask the gentleman that might be cleaning the floor as you walked in, why are you here?
Yeah.
He said, I'm here to put a man on the moon.
Absolutely.
It sounds to me exactly the same.
Well, it is, and I think it's very much the same, actually. And sometimes we, when you're unlucky or lucky enough to be at the head of something, you tend to get a lot of exposure. Especially if it goes okay. Well, go either way, you get a lot of exposure. Yeah. And I certainly wouldn't mind standing in front of people if it didn't go well. But I wouldn't say it's not embarrassing, it's humbling, because there's so many other people that are involved that don't get necessarily the credit. Right. And so you're trying to be humble, right? Because you're representing a community or an organization or whatever host committee that we had. Mm-hmm. But on the other side, you're the one in the front. So there's a balance between, there's quite a balance between being the one at the front all the time and not being there too much. Mm-hmm. Because all of a sudden, if you come from anywhere in a small place, well, holy geez, who was that fella? I remember when he just started doing whatever. Yeah. And so there's quite a balance there to try and make sure that you don't outweigh your welcome. Right. And it's one of the reasons why after 20-some years I thought it might be time for me to try something different. When you do all the things that we were able to do, there's no question you try and keep your youth here. There's no question you want to keep your talents here. But on the other side, if your talents all stay here, you're not going to be exposed to what the world does. Right. And so when we talked about education, I used to think my master's was, I was lucky enough to get hired to go work with Robert Irving and manage his hockey team, the Wildcats. But same principles is here. We were tagged as the community's team. And I can remember having very long conversations with Mr. Irving, say, well, what does that mean? Yeah. Like, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. It's a slogan, but what does it mean? And in order to be what you say, we have to be that. So programs like Reading is Wild, where the kids used to go and read to schools, and we used to, if we had season ticket holders or their families, something happened and someone passed away, we would make certain we went to funerals. Like we became, the community's team. Mm. And similar analogy to a degree when we started hosting in Summerside to build our facilities, we weren't winning really a lot as an organization. Mm-hmm. So again, that grassroots feeling, I remember going in, we need to try and host the Memorial Cup. If we host the Memorial Cup, the whole world is going to be looking at our organization And knowing the Irvings the way that most people would know them, we're going to put our best foot forward, and it's going to challenge us to be the best we can be. And so we were lucky enough to get that bid. Hosted the Memorial Cup in Moncton. It was
when was that?
96.
Yeah.
It was one of the more successful Memorial Cups at that time.
Did you flip a coin that day too?
Well, I didn't flip a coin that day.
What?
No, I did, but I flipped a lot since, and then some. However, but it was the same principle. In some ways, doing the Memorial Cup in Moncton, I wasn't a francophone. I remember, Mr. Irving saying, what are you going to say when they say you can't speak French? So the political answer, I thought, might be, well, I'm going to take courses. I'm going to do everything I possibly can. He said, no, Bill, tell them the truth. You can't speak French.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll do that, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll move to Dieppe, which is the francophone area, and I'll live there, and I'll learn from whoever I'm living beside, which we did. So we went on to do the Memorial Cup, and it was again how those things kind of unfold. I could remember not everyone within the organization, not unlike a community, they weren't necessarily always in favor of us stepping outside that comfort zone, if you want to call it, or that comfort level, because there's a risk. I don't think they're risks personally. I think they're just learning experiences, and you go on to the next one. But not everybody is always in favor, and that's where it's important to get people around you. One of my favorite books in my personal email is Go to Good to Great. And it really, the message there is that you may not always understand where the bus is going, but just make sure the bus is full of people willing to go. And
That's a great saying.
It's when you look at your life, and when you think of it that way, if you've got reluctant passengers, it makes it not a great trip.
Yeah.
But at least if everybody wants to be on the bus, doesn't mean you're not going to have your moments, but they've chosen to go on a trip.
Yeah.
And to me, that speaks volume on where
Bill,
we've been.
when you flipped that coin, I would have loved to have been in the room. Because man, are you ever an articulate person?
Well, it's again, when you look back, I wasn't really that prepared for this, but to your points, it does bring back a lot of memories. I can remember going down to meet with a minister, doesn't matter what minister, and we were trying to bring in a fairly significant event that we thought. And we weren't at that time, as I mentioned, tourism, sports tourism, that wasn't heard of like it is today. So we were kind of plowing new ground in a way. And we were from not the capital core, and sometimes there's a little challenge there. You have to work a little harder, maybe, I guess, and that's a good thing in the end. Anyway, I went down and met the minister. And I made my pitch, and geez, I thought I had everything down the way I wanted to have it, And you try, because again, you're going back to represent your community. And this particular minister, it matters not, he was sitting in the chair, and he was reading The Guardian. The whole time I made my pitch. And he just kept, and he just kept, and he just kept. Anyway, I was young, again, I was young enough. I didn't get into any kind of confrontation at the time, but I came to Hunter River, and I stopped at Hunter River. My grandfather used to manage the train station at Hunter River, and so I went by his house, and there's a hill there, and you overlook the hill. So I said, okay, you got a choice here, young fella. You're not going to be able to do this and get the help you think you're going to get, or you can do it without them. So we come home, we got a group around us, and said, we're not going to get what we think we need to get to do this, so we're either going to do it ourselves, and then down the road, maybe if it goes well enough, they may want. Now, eventually, fast forward, that minister turned corners and became another minister, and eventually came to one of our official openings of one of the largest events that we had in the community. And I remember going up to him and just saying, thank you for reading that Guardian that day.
Yeah.
I don't think he really understood what I said, but I did.
Yeah. Hopefully he's watching.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he's around.
Okay.
but he may be watching.
Yeah, you may be watching. Bill, a great journey you've taken us on so far, and I want to talk in a moment about what you're doing in the moment.
Okay.
But for now, I want to try something a little bit different here on GaleForceWins. You said you've got a collection of about 350 caps. You brought some of them in here today, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to challenge you. Okay. I'm going to give you a cap, and I'd like you, in about a minute, explain the significance of that cap to you and to this place that we're in, okay? And I'm going to start with one that's near and dear to Jerry and I's heart.
Yes,
We'll go with that one first.
Well, HMCS Summerside was christened in 1999. I was the Director of Recreation at the time. We were lucky enough to be part of the process of selecting the mother of the ship. And I was able to see that ship christened and have followed it ever since. The courage that those people that serve, or the people that serve on that ship, is a reminder that as safe as it is here, it's not necessarily safe everywhere. So we always believe that there's somebody protecting us, no matter where we go.
I believe the Summerside's on her way right now to go help the effort in the Ukraine.
She is. She just was commissioned, or she was just sent.
You just sent her off, and she's on her way there.
So
Well
I always
done.
have that to remind me of you need support.
Well, that's incredible, Bill. And I can tell you this: the sailors of the Summerside love coming here.
Yeah, well, they do.
Right? Okay, let's jump to another one.
Well, that was the Memorial Cup. We talked a little bit about stepping outside your comfort zone. We had a great organization. We just weren't winning enough. The Memorial Cup really was a springboard for the organization to begin to win on a very regular basis, to become a very respected opponent in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. But it also was a great example for me where we had Dieppe, Riverview, and Moncton on the committee, the greater Moncton area. And it went flawlessly, thanks again to a number of committee. However, the foundations we've gotten here allowed us to do that.
That's incredible. How about this one?
Well, that was an interesting one. I thought I was retired. I thought I had retired. I had a great run at Amherst, town of Amherst, which is not far from here. They were looking at revitalizing their recreation and community departments. I was home for about a year. I wasn't really very content being home. I was chairing the community health boards in Nova Scotia, and so I still had some networks there. I was asked if I have an interest in going to the District of Lunenburg to be their Director of Recreation, Parks and Tourism. So at 65, I decided I would do that. So this hat is a constant reminder that you're never too old to take on a new challenge. To their credit, they hired an older gentleman to do this. Or an older employee to do this. It was one of the better jobs I've ever had. However, circumstances, family-wise, I needed to be home. So this hat's going to remind me of that.
It's a beautiful part of the world, Lunenburg, Nova Scotia.
It's one of the nicest. Well, this one I think is I don't know for any of your audience if they've watched the series Yellowstone.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, Yellowstone, you get the Yellowstone branded.
Right.
I got this branded. So it says Summerside Pride. If you're not proud of where you come from, I'm not sure you've been brought up right.
Right.
So I feel I've been brought up right. This Summerside Pride slogan has served me well, our family well. It served, I think, the region well, the province well. But this will, regardless of this hat ever goes out of style, this hat will never leave us.
Well, I hope it doesn't turn into an episode like what Rip would take it to it.
Well, we have had our battles. Well, YMCAs, no matter what community you live in, are extremely important to it. So the Y in Amherst, really, I served on a number of Ys in different locations that I've been lucky enough to work in. But this one in particular, I served with a lady named Veronica Richards on the community health boards. I had mentioned I had worked my way up to sort of chair the Nova Scotia community health boards, and the YMCA gave Veronica and I the Peace Medal. So for those that are familiar with the Y, a Peace Medal is something that is very special. I don't get a lot of awards, if you want to call it that. To get a Peace Medal at that time in my career, my life, going to a community that you really never knew anybody when you got there, and when you left, you knew everybody by name. It was pretty special.
What year was that, Bill?
The award we would have gotten, that's a good question, we would have got around 2012 or 13, okay. Somewhere around there, maybe 2014. So again, I was sort of the new old guy. But we created a slogan there called "See Why We Love It." When I first went, or thought I might go there, I went undercover, went to the coffee shops, went to parks, just went to things that I could just listen. And I heard a lot of negativity, to be truthful. Mm-hmm. And I felt that they didn't really see the good, they just didn't see the good. And through the support of the CAO I had at the time, Greg Harrod, and a great team, we call them the A-Team because of Amherst, A-Team, we did a hashtag, See Why We Love It. And the hashtag is everywhere. You drive on the highway sign now past Amherst, wherever you go. And it's just to remind us that there's a lot of reasons to love where we are, and yeah, we can look at the bad things, but you know what? If you see why you love whatever it is, it changes kind of the way you think and look. And so that See Why We Love It's a pretty special.
Last one before we get into where you are now.
That's a different version. When we were on a roll here, our base was going to close. So I was the chair of the '89 World Junior Softball Championship, and Gloria and I were sitting in our small little house on Beaver Street East, not Beaver Street, that's the Fox there, then we're on the other side, Beaver Street East, and the national news comes on, and it said, just announced, just in, CFB Summerside will be closing.
Wow.
So here we were doing our first ever World Championship. Right, and I mean there was so many others. That was very selfish of me to think of that first, but that's what I thought about first. Geez, golf, what are we going to do? The base is such an important part of our life, and everything we do, we support each other. Anyhow, make a long story short, this became a rally cry for us. No, we're not going to die. We're not going to pack it up. We're not going to become something different. We're going to continue to do the things that we did and do, and we hosted the World, and teams from all over the world put the yellow ribbons on. Oh yeah, they put our yellow ribbons on when they found out the story, and every time we had a function with the teams during that whole time in national news as well, they had their yellow ribbons on, and they began to. It was a rally call for us, and so it turned from fear to holy cow, how are we going to pull this off with, you know, the morale is going to be down to nothing, versus nope, we're going to use that as a rally call. So that was developed at that time, and can't hide that Summerside pride. We had it on our slogan, we had it on our sleeves, we had it on signs, we had it almost like that Yellowstone brand, and it works.
Bill,
works.
When that base closed down,
Yep.
devastating, of course. I mean, that's a big part of the economy. Yep. But fast forward to where we are now, and what Summerside has done with that adversity at that time to where they are now, it's unbelievable. An aerospace industry would not exist in PEI had Summerside not stepped up and took charge of that base and made it into what it is today. I would argue renewable energy as we know it in PEI would not exist unless the people of Summerside did that at that base. So here we are. I mean, what a community. There's been many bases shut down across our country over the years, and you look at places like Cornwallis, Nova Scotia, and so on and so on. I don't think any have been as successful as what we see here in the aftermath.
That's an interesting. Never let a good crisis go to waste. like we can talk all we want about collaborating and working together. We're not unlike any other community that's out there. We still have work to do. But the base was a rally call. When you're pushed against the back of the wall or in the corner, matters not if you're friend or foe, matters not if what your name is. It means that we have to do whatever we have to do to be successful. And that meant thinking out. It was the best lesson in life we ever had. I was lucky enough to be quite involved at the time. We went over and met Mayor Bellevaux in Moncton at the time, and because Moncton had gone through the CN shop closures, and we wanted to get advice. And I can remember he looking at us. We said, like, if you give us one piece of it, the best piece of advice you can give us. He said, tell everyone how good you are. Anyway, we kind of chuckled, and we asked again, and we asked him the third time. He said, tell people how good you're doing. It works. Like you can talk about how negative things are. You can talk about all you want, and I mean the media today, unfortunately, is they're in that trap, really. Yeah. And so what I so much liked about your vision when after you called, full disclosure, I started to look into it, and the positivity you're looking for, the inspiration you're looking for, like really and truly, when you look at anything that normally happens good, that's a component of it, and we tend to, as humans, we always use the word but. Mm-hmm. We had a campaign in Amherst, Scratch the Butt. We had pins and we had buttons.
Scratch the butt was the
Scratch the
campaign
butt.
slogan.
That was the slogan. Scratch the butt. Not in the butt. But when you think of it, so I just did it.
That's great.
When you think of it, the word butt tends to be a little bit negative. So, gee, Bill, great idea, butt.
Yeah, nothing good's
Great
coming
idea,
after the butt.
Yeah.
And so we had a slogan actually that we brought a number of citizens at center ice of Amherst Stadium, put them around the circle during the summer, similar now with no ice on, and we created this campaign together, Scratch the Butt.
Wow.
Pretty neat.
It's great. Bill, a great conversation there. Here you are, you're back in Summerside.
Yep.
What are you doing in the moment? Where are you now? What are you involved
Well,
in?
I was looking for some, as I mentioned, I'm not ready. I think I have some energy to give. I think I have.
Go on, do you?
I do. I think I do. I hope I do. I hope I'm planning on it.
We don't sense that.
The Chamber of Commerce, anywhere I've ever gone, so I've had a number of stops along the way. Hardest decision was to leave here. Once you leave here it's not that hard to move after that.
Right.
Gloria always stayed here, so I always commuted, so my home was still always here. I always still had roots here. However, the Chamber of Commerce was one of the first places I ever went to connect. So we talk about being friendly, we talk about being welcoming, and no matter where you go, it's a two-way street. If you don't go and throw yourself out there, you're going to have a hard time. Mm-hmm. But if you at least make an effort. So Chamber of Commerce is to me, it's kind of a little bit of a barometer of the health of a community. If you have an active, healthy chamber, if you have an active, healthy business community, you tend to have a place where people want to live. So a chamber's been very special to me. I was with the Lewiston Maniacs back in 2010-11, and that's a whole other podcast, but I was with the Maniacs. We had to sell the team, and I was driving down, the interstate with no work, and my son was with us, or with me, I should say, and he had no work, and we were just out of work. So driving down the interstate, and luckily would have it, the Summerside Chamber were looking for a general manager at the time. So I was lucky enough to get a call, threw my name in, and I was lucky enough to get it. So I spent a couple of years there. It wasn't at the stage of my career where the income was where it needed to be for me at that time, but I really enjoyed it. I really saw from the inside the impact a chamber can have. There's nothing when you think of it that a chamber couldn't become involved in, or in my role, wanting to be involved. There's no meeting that I couldn't actually crash and not defend that the chamber should be there. Right? Mm-hmm. So when you really want to be involved, pretty easy to get the door open if you're with the chamber. So I'm very hopeful that.
So what's your role at the chamber now?
They call it executive director, so kind of like a GM.
Right.
So just started. It's
when did you start?
A couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
So I'm looking very much forward to reconnecting with the community. The community has changed some, for the better, and using whatever voice that we have to advocate for a continued growth. Newcomers are extremely important. We're not unlike any other community. We can't find enough people to do work for the business that we have. Supply chain is killing us in terms of we're making decisions that most people, but however, there's opportunities to that.
Right.
And so what are those opportunities? And so hopefully we can scratch the butt when it comes to chamber business and move on kind of from there. So I'm looking very much forward to that.
It is a vibrant community out here in Summerside. Right? It's there's good things happening out here.
It is. It's we're very lucky. We have a lot of great people that do a lot of great things, and all of a sudden they just happen. Charlottetown has expanded. Like Charlottetown has boomed, and so we're enjoying some of that advantage too, because there's only so much growth can happen in one area. Where I was in Lunenburg, we had 125 full-time jobs the last time we brought our major employers in. Building permits through the roof. So it's a regional thing. People are beginning, if nothing else, this pandemic has shown the world that we're safe, that we're open for business, that we're a great place to live, work, and play, and do business with. So that crisis is helping us.
Yeah.
So it is. What's happening in the world right now is helping our region as well. And the world now is so small. Like at one time, it was a major trip to go somewhere. I mean, today, not counting, some of the challenges the airlines are having with the exact things we mentioned, you can go anywhere in a day.
Your ferry service to PEI is fantastic.
Well, it's a great service, and I'd like to think that, and not playing politics, but Lawrence Macaulay has been a long-time politician down in the eastern end of the province, and he's got one of these pride buttons, only it's from his world. And he wears that on his sleeve, and he fought for that ferry service, and has been supported by the by the community and by the federal and provincial and other governments. But it's that experience. Bridge is a wonderful other experience.
100%.
But there still needs to be, I said, but again. So however, there's still that other experience, right? Nothing like having a hot dog on one of those ships, smelling the ocean, docking, seagulls following you. It's a commercial for tourism, no question.
If you look, 20 miles from where we're seated right here now, there is a lot of good things going on.
There are.
You got that big ADL plant over there. World-class product, right?
Yeah.
Right here, the end of the street down there, right?
Yeah.
As we talked about the base, you look at what's going on over there. Solar panels going in. Samsung investing heavily in this part of Prince Edward Island. I mean, you can go on and on. I mean, some of the biggest potato operations in the world just run up the road. Just up the road from here, right? And it's all happening in and around this little place. What's in the sauce here? What is in this secret sauce?
Well, I think people. I think there's a work ethic there for sure. There's a tremendous amount of pride. Like there. I remember there's a reverse of that. I remember there was a young gentleman who started a business, and it didn't work. It just didn't work. So it happens. It happens. And I remember going to visit him and shaking his hand and thanking him for trying. And he said, "You're the only one." I'm not. I didn't mean that the way that may sound, but it's not it's unusual for somebody to thank me for something that failed. So what drives us too is sometimes that we don't want to fail. Right. And to your point, there's a number of great companies. ADL 1953. There's so many great companies that have been led by great people and very proud people. And there's something to be said when you know the people in your community. There's nowhere to hide, sort of thing. We used to say that with sports teams. And Gardner McDougall, for example, just took the Sea Dogs, and he was one of our employees in the Old Bedeck Rec Center when he was that high, and he was the coach that was hired at the end. And anyway, he used to say, Gardner, now the first thing you need to do, get the kids in the community, get them helping people cross the street, get them to help the kids get to school on the crosswalks, because they can't hide if people know them. There's something to be said about that. You're playing for people, or you're working for people, or the people that you know are family that are working for you. So I think that work ethic is something that and there's been a lot of great support from different levels of governments and people taking that and turning it into a positive for them. And I think it's in our water a little bit. And we got great water here too.
You got great water here too. But what you just described there is no different than, at the beginning of the conversation you talked about flipping that coin and thinking to yourself, this is not about me. This is about the people that I represent, right? This is about the people of Summerside. And you're so right. And I think that people here genuinely want each other to succeed. Jerry and I, and we both come from Newfoundland, we often use an expression that a rising tide floats all boats, right?
It does.
And it sure does, right? And it's proof here in Summerside that is indeed the case. So it's clear you're not slowing down.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Hope not.
What's over the horizon? Where do you see yourself?
Well, that's a really good question, and I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. I don't know the answer to that. I'm hopeful that it's one of the challenges. I like to challenge myself, to be truthful. One of the challenges is that I've been gone for quite some time. Can I reconnect? Can I use those experiences and have an impact? And can I help the community continue to grow? If I feel I can, then I'll stay where I'm going. If I feel I can't, then I certainly will find something else. But there's something to be said for, I've basically been working outside for 18 or the last 20 years. So to be able to come back and still feel welcomed. There's a sense that, oh well, Billy's going to, you know, try and with his group, you know, move the cheese a little bit. So there's a little, I wouldn't say pressure. Pressure is doing a world tournament when you have no field, no money. This isn't what you call pressure. Yeah. But it's still, there's an expectation. Right. And I'd like to think, you know, I mentioned we'll finish where we started. I have a 91-year-old father. He's been proud of me for his 91 years, I think. Maybe the odd moment. But generally speaking, I hope that he continues to be proud of me. And same with my family. So that's really, I'm not looking for any, this isn't a career anymore. This is more of a, I'd like to say that this is just something I want to do to see if I can continue to help. Right. Is a better way to put it.
You talk a lot about family. We've talked a lot about family, and one of the themes that Jerry and I often find when we talk to folks like yourself is there's always a supportive partner behind you, right?
Oh, yeah.
Jerry and I have that. We couldn't do what we do without it. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, mine is my best friend, so Gloria. I was lucky enough to meet her, I forget now, at the same time I was starting in Badek, I guess. And really, like many people, I had not sure what I was going to do at that time. I actually took her on a date to, I was coaching a Wrigley midget hockey team at the time, so I asked her if she'd come to that. And then we were driving to Charlottetown, and I was Hunter River again. It's funny, Hunter River. I hit a bird. I hit a bird. The car hit a bird, little bird. And I'm deaf in my right ear, and so I sensed, but I didn't really hear. And I looked, and here the tears were coming down her eyes because I had hit this bird. Mm-hmm. So I said to myself, Billy, of all the experiences you've had so far, if this lady is going to be emotional that you've hit a bird, she might be a keeper. So this Gloria, not only has she been our strength as our family, I've worked a lot, been away a lot. Missed a lot of things. She's always been the mom, the dad. Yeah. So she's a special person. She's always supported me in anything I've ever done, any idea I've had. And it hasn't always been easy. It hasn't. And so when you go home and you say, okay, Glo, I think I'd like to try and get the blimp to Somerset. And I have. And she'd say, Bill, you'll find a way. Yeah. You know, and she'll support you. She'll also be grounding. And I did phone, and I did get to Akron, Ohio to get the blimp. Yeah. And I remember the gentleman finally, it took me about 9 calls to get there. And I remember the gentleman saying, well, Mr. Schurman, it sounds like a really neat proposal. We'd like to go anywhere where we have 10 million impressions. So I said, well, our population is going to double during the tournament. And he said, well, what's your population? I said, 10,000. He said, thanks for calling. But I did end up speaking to him, you know. Yeah. So, I mean, she's been our rock. Yeah, so we all have those special people. And yeah, she's allowed me to do the things that I thought I should do. And I'm sure, looking back at it, I don't know how she's kept me, but we're awful glad she has.
There you go. How many years does it mean?
1977.
Yeah. There you go. Bill, we often ask our guests on GaleForceWins, people that have had an interesting journey, and you've had a few of them, to leave the audience with a piece of advice. What would something like that be?
My suggestion would be, if you look at me and some of the things that I've been lucky enough to do, I've always practiced that all anyone could say is no. So if you don't ask, and if you don't ask more than once, all they can say, what's the worst that could ever happen to you is that somebody might say no. And half the time you don't even have to tell the world that they've said no. Right. So there's nothing out there that I believe that can't be accomplished, nothing. You just have to have a little bit of courage, and with the thought that all they can say is no. That's the worst that could ever happen. So I mentioned we spoke to students at Three Oaks the other day, and I think the last group that we had was that, you know, the world, you can do anything you want to do in this world. People will say that you may not be able to, but there's living proof right in your households, right in your family, right on your streets, right in your communities that, you know what, you can do anything you want to do. You just need to go do it and surround yourself with people that that are like-minded, that are willing to support you through thick and thin. So all anybody can say is no, I think.
Jerry, your thoughts?
Well, Bill, I've been pretty quiet, just listening. There's no room for negativity, as you've kind of said earlier on, and the positivity that you're exuding here today is just amazing. We created GaleForceWins for exactly this. I've been to PEI many times, but I never had an opportunity to sit and talk to someone like you. Thank you for scratching the butt.
Well, thank you. Thank you, and all the best. We'll certainly keep in touch.
Well, another wonderful edition of GaleForceWins, and I want to tell you, this has been a wonderful conversation, Bill. There's no doubt about it. Tenacity comes to mind. You're not one that's going to give up very easily. But I will tell you this, the entire conversation has been an hour, I'm sure, that we spoke. You really never mentioned yourself much at all. You mentioned everybody around you. You mentioned all the people that helped you get to the places you wanted to get to. And that's pure leadership, man. That's innate leadership, that you're able to take these people and move them in a direction and move your community in a direction. And we're seated in a very place where some of the world's best have entered this area. The likes of Elton John have stood feet away from where we stand right now. And it's because of people like you that are driving this beautiful little city on this beautiful little island in a direction that most would say, how are they doing it? But you're not taking no for an answer, so well done to you.
Well, thank you very much.
So I like to leave the podcast with my own piece of advice, and quite honestly, the world needs more Billy Schurman.
Thank you for tuning in to GaleForceWins. That's GaleForceWins, WINS.com.